Hey, welcome back. Or if you're new here, good to have you. I'm Agent Monahan, and this is the channel where we take on the topics that everyone talks about but never explains. History, science, economics, politics, how things actually work. If that sounds like your kind of channel, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss it. Now, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about the love-hate relationship that everyone knows is there but doesn't know what to do about it. The United States and China. As we all feel that in our hearts, this unique couple shakes up the global economy at every level through their hidden partnership. But when you look at them closely, it becomes quite obvious that the two largest economies on Earth are the biggest trading partner of each other, though they tend to emphasize only their heated rivalry. In 2024 alone, they traded around $660 billion in goods and services. Such a number cannot stand between warring enemies. That number alone makes it clear that the two economies are completely tangled together. It is undeniable they compete for technology and military power. Yet, strangely enough, they also fund each other when both of them seem pretty anxious about each other. It, in every possible term to explain such a relationship, is a definition of a love-hate relationship. Then, let's break it down and see who actually owns a higher share. Let's start with what's most strange: the loans. For decades, China was one of the biggest buyers of U.S. government debt, treasury bonds. At its 2013 peak, China owned almost 10% of the whole American debt by holding $1.3 trillion of such bonds. By early 2026, those holdings had fallen to near $690 billion, about half the peak, dropping China to third, behind Japan and the UK. It is not comparable to the peak year, but still is a pretty significant amount held by the hostile competitor. Some say it is because China wants to be able to crash America's economy whenever it would like to by dumping all those bonds at once. That's technically true, but when you look closer, it cannot be the reason. A fire sale would collapse the value of every bond China still holds, and the wave of disruption that will follow such a collapse won't leave the U.S. economy the only one that breaks down. Or maybe the damage would be a bigger hit to the Chinese economy, which is currently struggling to have its own debt restructuring. Remember, China has enough bills to pay with its business subsidies alone. So the weapon exists, but firing it would burn both sides. The love-hate relationship in its purest form. You could flip the dinner table and let your husband know you are pissed, but don't forget it is your favorite water glass that is on that table. I thought you really liked that glass. Maybe it is all about this precious crown of the U.S. that China badly wants, the U.S. dollar. It's the world's reserve currency, what most countries hold in reserves and settle their trade in. The dollar is about 57% of global foreign exchange reserves now, down from nearly 70% 20 years ago, but still, no one doubts that it is the currency that runs it all. As you may have noticed from Iran's threat to have its oil traded in the Chinese yuan, it seems that China has come pretty close to where the dollar is at. But when around 48% of SWIFT transactions are being made in U.S. dollars, the Chinese yuan definitely has a long way to go to say it's there to compete with the dollar. The yuan has only about 3% of the transaction volume. The gap is not close at all. But we also cannot simply ignore China has been working hard. It built its own cross-border payment system and extended currency swap lines abroad. It also launched a digital yuan and pushed partners to settle trade in yuan. Though low in SWIFT transactions, the yuan's share of global trade finance has grown to 6%. But despite all those efforts, the yuan holds only about 2% in global reserves. Compared to the dollar, an infrastructure built over the past 80 years, the yuan is just an ambition. It is certainly true that China has achieved phenomenal economic growth over the past decades. When President Richard Nixon visited China for the first time in 1972, the size of the Chinese economy was roughly $133 billion. which was not even 1/10 of that of the U.S. at that time. Now it operates one that amounts to $19 trillion, when the U.S. has one at $28 trillion. The gap became obviously smaller during those years. The Chinese debt leverage is clearly overrated, and the U.S. still wins by a wide margin in its currency power. But can we say that the U.S. is winning for sure? The Chinese government claims it is inches close, but a 45 percentage point gap in currency reserves is still quite huge. So, here's the summary. On the metrics that matter most, currency, financial control, economic depth, the U.S. holds the upper hand. But it cannot be said that the U.S. is surely winning. It runs a huge trade deficit with China, its debt needs buyers, and its supply chains run through Chinese factories. China has real vulnerabilities too, a property sector in crisis, an aging population, and a yuan the world still doesn't fully trust. Neither side can walk away. The trade is too large, the debt too entangled, the supply chains too connected. This is the trap, built slowly over 40 years by both sides. They are lovers, not enemies. They may be the defining rivalry of our era, but it is nothing close to what we had in the Cold War. Joseph Stalin would have laughed out loud if the U.S. and the Soviet Union were to become trade partners. Back in the fierce era, the biggest rivals didn't have any trade relationship at all. Doesn't that tell you something when the U.S. and China trade $660 billion a year now? They aren't separate systems glaring across a wall. They're one system just arguing over who runs it. That's the love-hate economy. Two partners who need each other, distrust each other, and have no idea how to stop. If this was in a relationship advice column, the answer would be obvious. Keep talking, keep trading, and don't flip the table, though you are pissed. That's all for today. Hope that actually made sense of it. If you found it useful, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you catch the next one. Agent Monahan will see you soon.